13 Signs You'll See When Life's Chaos is Secretly Creating Order. Carl Jung. There's a question I need you to consider, not lightly, not dismissively, but with the full weight of your lived experience behind it. What if the breakdown you're experiencing right now isn't a breakdown at all? What if it's a breakthrough disguised as disaster? What if everything falling apart in your life right now is the most intelligent thing that's ever happened to you? I know how that sounds. When your marriage is ending, when you've lost your job, when your health is failing, when you can't recognize the person staring back at you in the mirror, the last thing you want to hear is that this chaos has purpose. You want solutions. You want it to stop. You want your life back. But here's what Carl Jung discovered in his decades of working with people in crisis, and what I've witnessed again and again in my own journey through chaos. The unconscious orchestrates chaos when conscious life has become too rigid, too false, too disconnected from who you actually are. Chaos isn't the opposite of order. It's the crucible where deeper order is born. Let me tell you about Daniel. 5 years ago, his life exploded, not in one area, everywhere simultaneously. Within a 3-month window, his wife filed for divorce. His company downsized, and he lost the job he'd held for 15 years. 2 weeks after that, he ended up in the emergency room with what doctors initially feared was a heart attack. It turned out to be a severe panic attack, but the diagnostic process revealed he had dangerously high blood pressure and was pre-diabetic. Daniel called me from his sister's basement where he was temporarily living. "I don't understand," he said. "How does everything go wrong at once? What did I do to deserve this?" That's the question we all ask in chaos, isn't it? What did I do wrong? But Daniel's question contained a hidden assumption that chaos is punishment, that destruction is inherently bad, that what's falling apart should have stayed together. I asked Daniel a different question. What if nothing went wrong? What if this is your psyche's emergency intervention? He was silent for a long time. Here's what we discovered over the next several years. Daniel's marriage had been dead for 7 years, but he'd stayed because divorce was failure. His job had been soul-crushing for a decade, but he'd stayed because it was stable. His health crisis was the inevitable result of years of stress he'd ignored, suppressed, and pushed down because he had to hold it together. Daniel had built what looked like a perfectly ordered life, but it was order in service of fear, not authenticity. Order built on pretending, not being, and the unconscious. That vast, intelligent force that Jung spent his life trying to understand had been sending Daniel signals for years. Quiet whispers at first, dreams he dismissed, longings he ignored, moments of depression he medicated away with, busyness. The unconscious tried subtlety. Daniel wasn't listening, so it escalated. Jung wrote something that stopped me cold when I first read it. In all chaos, there is a cosmos. In all disorder, a secret order. Not chaos leads to order eventually, or order emerges after chaos. He said the order is already in the chaos. Hidden, secret, but there. What if your breakdown isn't random? What if the timing of each collapse, the specific areas that are falling apart, the way it's all happening? What if there's an architecture to this destruction? What if the chaos knows exactly what it's doing? This is the forbidden insight at the heart of Jung's work, the one that makes people uncomfortable. Your psyche is more intelligent than your conscious mind. And when your conscious life has become a prison of false personas, constructed identities, and unlived truths, the unconscious will burn it down, not out of cruelty, out of love, out of absolute commitment to your becoming. Let me be clear about something crucial here. This isn't toxic positivity. This isn't everything happens for a reason, spiritual bypassing. I'm not suggesting you should be grateful for your suffering or that abuse, trauma, or genuine tragedy is somehow good. What I'm pointing to is more subtle and more profound. There's a difference between chaos that happens to you, random external catastrophe, genuine victimization, and chaos that erupts from you, from the depths of your own psyche, because the life you're living is killing who you actually are. Most of us experience some combination of both. But the chaos that erupts from within, the kind that demolishes the structures you built, the identities you maintained, the relationships you sustained through pretending, that chaos is different. That chaos is communication. That chaos is creative. And here's what Daniel discovered 5 years after his life exploded. Every single thing that fell apart, his marriage, his job, his health, had required him to be someone he wasn't. His wife had married his persona, not his self. His job demanded he suppress his actual values. His body had been screaming for years that this lifestyle was unsustainable. The chaos didn't destroy Daniel's life. It destroyed the life that was destroying Daniel. 5 years later, he's remarried to someone who knows him, not his performance. He's working in a completely different field that pays less but feeds his soul. His health metrics have completely transformed. But here's what he told me that matters most. I look at photos of myself from before and I don't recognize that person. I look happy in the pictures, but I wasn't alive. I was a ghost operating a body, performing a life. Now I can already hear the resistance rising in some of you. But my chaos is different. My chaos is genuinely bad. My chaos isn't creating anything. It's destroying everything. I understand. I've been there. And I'm not asking you to trust me yet. I'm asking you to look at something, to watch for something, to stay curious about something, because there are signs, unmistakable signs that the chaos you're experiencing isn't random destruction but creative destruction. Signs that underneath the surface catastrophe, a deeper order is forming. Signs that your psyche is trying to show you the architecture, the blueprint, the hidden pattern. There are 13 of them, 13 signs that chaos is secretly creating order. Not 13 theories, not 13 concepts, 13 observable phenomena that appear again and again in people whose chaos was actually transformation wearing a terrifying mask. I'm going to walk you through each one. I'm going to tell you the stories of real people who saw these signs and what they discovered. I'm going to show you how to recognize them in your own chaos. And I'm going to teach you what Jung taught his patients, how to read the unconscious, how to hear what chaos is trying to tell you, how to trust the process even when every fiber of your being wants to fight it or flee it. But first, you need to understand something fundamental about how the psyche works. The ego, your conscious sense of I, doesn't want chaos. The ego wants predictability, control, security. The ego builds order, but the ego's order is often constructed around fear, around social conditioning, around family expectations, around survival strategies you developed as a child that no longer serve you as an adult. The self, Jung's term for the totality of your being, the organizing center of your psyche, wants truth, wants wholeness, wants authenticity. And when there's too much distance between the life your ego is living and the life your self needs to live, the self acts. It creates chaos, not as punishment, as intervention, as emergency surgery, as controlled demolition of structures that have become prisons. The 13 signs I'm about to show you are the self's way of communicating during this demolition. I'm in charge now. I know this is terrifying, but trust me, there's a plan, there's an architecture, there's order in this chaos. You just can't see it yet. Daniel couldn't see it during those 3 months when everything fell apart. He thought he was dying. He thought he'd lost everything. He thought his life was over. He was right, but not in the way he thought. The life he'd been living was over. The person he'd been pretending to be was over. The order he'd constructed out of fear and conditioning and unlived truth was over. And in the ruins, space opened up. Space for something new, space for something real, space for someone true. That's what this chaos is creating in you right now. I know you can't see it yet, but the signs are there. They've always been there. You just didn't know what you were looking at. Until now. Over the next 2 hours, I'm going to teach you to read your chaos, the way Jung taught his patients to read their dreams, as communication from the unconscious, as symbolic language, as navigation through the dark forest. I'm going to show you that you're not lost, you're not broken, you're not failing, you're transforming, and transformation looks like death before it looks like birth. It looks like chaos before it looks like order. It looks like ending before it looks like beginning. Are you ready to see the pattern? Are you ready to discover the architecture hidden in your chaos? Are you ready to learn what your psyche has been trying to tell you all along? Then let's begin. The first sign is the most dramatic and the most unmistakable. The first sign that your chaos is secretly creating order is this. Multiple areas of your life collapse at once, not sequentially, not one thing, then another, simultaneously, as if orchestrated, as if some invisible force decided that everything had to come down at the same time. You lose your job, and in the same week, your relationship ends. Or your health fails just as your career implodes. Or your identity crisis, your financial collapse, and your living situation all disintegrate within the same narrow window of time. This isn't bad luck. This isn't Murphy's Law. This isn't the universe being cruel. This is synchronistic destruction. Let me explain what I mean by that. Jung's concept of synchronicity, meaningful coincidence, is usually discussed in positive terms. You think of someone and they call. You need information and the perfect book falls off a shelf in front of you. You're at a crossroads and a stranger says exactly what you needed to hear. But synchronicity works in destruction too. When the unconscious decides it's time for transformation, it doesn't demolish one support beam and wait to see if you get the message. It brings down the entire structure at once. Because everything, your job, your relationship, your health, your identity was built on the same false foundation. Let me tell you about Rachel. Rachel was 38 when her life imploded. In a 6-month period, she experienced what she called the collapse of everything I thought I was. It started with her father's death. Sudden heart attack. No warning. She was devastated, but she tried to hold it together. She was the strong one in her family, the one everyone leaned on, the one who managed things. 2 months after her father's funeral, her company was acquired and her position was eliminated. 20 years in corporate marketing, gone. They gave her a severance package and thanked her for her service. She had 3 months to find a new job. 1 month after that, her husband told her he wanted a divorce. He'd been unhappy for years. He'd met someone else. He'd already retained a lawyer. Rachel came to therapy because she thought she was having a nervous breakdown. "How does everything fall apart at once?" she asked me. "What are the odds? What did I do?" But here's what we discovered as we worked together. Rachel's therapist asked her a simple question that changed everything. What did all of these things have in common? Rachel stared at her for a long time, then she started to cry. "They all required me to be someone I wasn't," she whispered. Her father, she'd spent her entire life trying to make him proud, performing achievement, suppressing her own desires to meet his expectations. Even after his death, she felt his judgment, his standards, his voice in her head telling her who she should be. Her job. She'd stayed in corporate marketing because it looked impressive, because it paid well, because it was successful. But she hated it. Every Sunday night for years, she'd felt dread about Monday morning. She'd numbed herself to that feeling, told herself everyone hates their job, convinced herself this was just adult life. Her marriage, she and her husband had grown into strangers. They performed marriage. They looked happy in photos, but they hadn't had a real conversation in years. They hadn't been intimate in longer. She'd been maintaining the appearance of a good marriage while dying inside of loneliness. And her health, within weeks of her husband leaving, she was diagnosed with an autoimmune condition. Her body had been attacking itself. The doctor said stress was likely a major factor. Years of stress. Years of suppressing who she was. Years of her immune system unable to distinguish self from non-self because Rachel herself couldn't distinguish her authentic self from her performed self. Do you see what happened? Rachel's life didn't randomly collapse. The scaffolding that held up her entire false identity came down. Father's approval, career identity, marriage persona, physical health, all at once. Because they were all connected. They were all built on the same foundation, the person she was pretending to be. Jung wrote, "The unconscious doesn't do anything without good reason, though the conscious mind cannot see the reason." The unconscious looked at Rachel's life and saw a prison, a beautifully decorated prison, a successful-looking prison, but a prison nonetheless. And it did what the unconscious always does when the ego refuses to change. It created a crisis that made change inevitable. Now, let me give you a framework for recognizing this sign in your own life. I call it the simultaneous collapse recognition test. Ask yourself these questions. Question 1. Have 2 or more major life areas collapsed within a 6-month window? Major life areas include career, purpose, primary relationship, health, living situation, identity, sense of self, key relationships, financial stability. If yes, move to question 2. Question 2. Can you identify a common thread, a way of being, a false self, a persona, an identity that all the collapsed areas required you to maintain? This is the critical question. Don't rush it. Sit with it. Journal about it, because this is where the pattern reveals itself. Rachel's common thread. I am the strong, successful, put-together woman who doesn't need anything from anyone. Daniel's common thread. I am the stable, reliable provider who sacrifices his own desires for others. For me, and yes, I've experienced this too, the common thread was, I am the helpful, wise, always available guide who has transcended his own needs. That persona was costing me my health, my creativity, my intimate relationships, and my actual self. And the unconscious took it all down at once. Question 3. Did the collapses escalate after you ignored earlier, subtler signals? This is crucial to understand. The unconscious doesn't start with catastrophe. It starts with whispers. Maybe you've been having recurring dreams about being trapped or drowning or trying to speak, but no sound comes out. Maybe you've been experiencing vague dissatisfaction, a sense that something's wrong, but you can't name it. Maybe you've noticed yourself becoming cynical, numb, or going through the motions of your life like an actor in a play you didn't audition for. These are whispers, and when we ignore the whispers, when we push them down, medicate them away with busyness or substances or distractions, the unconscious escalates. Whisper becomes shout. Shout becomes crisis. Crisis becomes catastrophe. Rachel had been having panic attacks for 2 years before her father died. She'd been experiencing mysterious physical symptoms, fatigue, brain fog, joint pain that doctors couldn't explain. She'd been having intrusive thoughts about leaving her marriage. She'd been fantasizing about quitting her job and moving to another country, starting over as someone completely different, all whispers, all ignored, all pushed down beneath the surface of her performed life, until the unconscious said, enough. If you won't listen to the whisper, you'll have to listen to the earthquake. Here's what I need you to understand. This isn't punishment. I know it feels like punishment, but it's not. It's intervention. It's the part of you that wants to live doing everything in its power to end the life that's killing you. the simultaneous collapse. This is sign number one that chaos is creating order, happens because everything was connected to the same false structure. You can't renovate a house that's built on a crumbling foundation. You have to tear it down and rebuild from the ground up. That's what's happening in your life right now. If you're experiencing multiple collapses at once, if the timing feels impossibly cruel, if you're asking, why is everything falling apart at the same time? It's because everything was built on the same lie, the same persona, the same false self. And the truth of who you actually are, yourself in Jung's language, is creating space for something real. Now, I know some of you are thinking, but I didn't choose this. My spouse left me. My company laid me off. I got sick. These things happened to me, not from me. Yes, and also no. We don't consciously choose chaos, but our psyche does create the conditions for chaos when transformation is necessary. This is the subtle, almost mystical part of Jung's teaching that makes people uncomfortable. You didn't consciously decide to get sick, but your body has been speaking your unconscious truth for years. You didn't consciously sabotage your marriage, but the person you were pretending to be in that marriage, was that person actually you? Or was it a role you were performing? The simultaneity is the key. When everything falls apart at once, look for the common foundation, because that's what's being demolished. Not your life, not you. The false structure that was suffocating your actual life, your actual self. Rachel is 4 years out from her collapse now. Her life looks completely different. She's working as a wilderness therapy guide, something she never would have had the courage to pursue in her old life. She's in a relationship with someone who knows her, not her persona. Her autoimmune symptoms have significantly reduced since she started living authentically. But here's what she told me that matters most. I thought the collapse was the end. It was the beginning. Everything that fell apart needed to fall apart. I was living in a beautiful prison, and the unconscious broke me out. It didn't feel like rescue at the time, but that's what it was. So if you're in the middle of a simultaneous implosion right now, if multiple areas of your life are crumbling at once, don't just ask, why is this happening to me? Ask, what false structure am I being freed from? What authentic life is trying to be born? What common foundation is being demolished so something true can be built? The chaos isn't random. The timing isn't cruel. The simultaneity isn't coincidence. It's synchronistic destruction. It's creative chaos. It's the first sign that underneath the collapse, an architecture of order is already forming. An order based not on who you were pretending to be, but on who you actually are. And that's when the second sign often appears, a sign from even deeper in the unconscious, speaking in the language of symbols and dreams. The second sign that your chaos is secretly creating order is this. A specific dream, image, or symbol begins appearing repeatedly, not occasionally, not randomly, repeatedly, insistently, as if your unconscious has something urgent to communicate and is sending the same message over and over until you finally listen. It might come in night dreams. It might appear in synchronicities. You see the same image in 3 different places in one day. It might become an obsession, an image you can't get out of your mind. This is the unconscious speaking to you directly, not in words, in symbols. And during chaos, when your conscious mind is overwhelmed and your defenses are down, these symbolic communications become more frequent, more vivid, more insistent. Let me tell you about Marcus. Marcus was a 45-year-old architect whose life unraveled over the course of 18 months. His firm lost its major client. His marriage ended. His father developed dementia, and Marcus became his primary caregiver. Everything he'd built, career identity, family structure, sense of control, was dissolving, but something else was happening too. Marcus started having the same dream, night after night after night. In the dream, he was standing in front of a house, his house, though it didn't look like any house he'd actually lived in. And the house was on fire, massive flames pouring out of every window, and in the dream, he was just standing there, watching it burn, not running away, not trying to put it out, just watching. Sometimes he woke up in a panic, sometimes he woke up strangely calm. But the dream kept coming back, 2, 3, 4 times a week, for months. Marcus came to therapy and mentioned the dream almost as an afterthought. "I'm probably just anxious about everything falling apart," he said. "The burning house is pretty obvious, right? My life is burning down." "Yes," I said. "And?" He looked confused. "And what?" "And what else is the house?" This is where dream work begins, not with reduction, the house represents X, but with amplification. What else could this image mean? What other associations does it carry? What is the unconscious trying to communicate through this specific symbol? We started exploring. I asked Marcus, "In the dream, how do you feel watching the house burn?" He thought about it. "Scared at first, but then relieved. Is that weird?" "No," I said. "It's interesting. Tell me more." "It's like I should be terrified. It's my house. Everything I own is in there. But in the dream, there's this feeling of liberation, like I'm being freed from something." "What's in the house?" I asked. "My life," he said automatically. Then he paused. "My old life. The person I was. The architect with the successful firm, and the perfect marriage, and the impressive portfolio. That person lived in that house." We sat with that for a long time. Then I asked him, "In the dream, do you ever try to save anything from the house?" "No," he said. "I just watch it burn, like I know it has to burn, like I know there's nothing worth saving." This is what Jung called the wisdom of the unconscious. Marcus's conscious mind was in agony over his life falling apart. He was grieving his marriage, terrified about his career, overwhelmed by caregiving. He wanted to put the fires out. He wanted to rebuild. He wanted his old life back. But his unconscious knew better. The house, his persona, his false self, the architecture of his carefully constructed identity, needed to burn completely. Nothing saved, because that structure was a prison, and you can't renovate a prison into a home. You have to let it burn and build something new from the ashes. The recurring dream wasn't torment, it was preparation. It was the unconscious showing Marcus what was happening and why. It was saying, "I know the ego is terrified, but trust me. This fire is necessary. This destruction is creative. Watch it burn. Don't try to save it. Let it all go." Jung wrote, "Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes." During chaos, we're often forced inside. Our external life is in ruins. There's nothing to look at out there except destruction. So we turn inward, and that's when the dreams come. That's when the symbols start appearing. That's when the unconscious, which has been trying to get our attention for years, finally has a clear channel. Now let me teach you how to work with recurring symbols during your chaos. Because this isn't just interesting psychology, it's practical navigation. Your unconscious is sending you a map. You need to learn to read it. Step 1. Document the symbol. Keep a dream journal. The moment you wake up, write down the dream or image. Don't wait. Don't think you'll remember later. Dreams fade fast. Write them down immediately. Note the symbol, your emotions in the dream. Any other figures or elements, how the dream ends, how you feel upon waking. If the symbol appears in waking life, you keep seeing a specific animal or number or image, document that too. When did you see it? What was happening in your life at that moment? What were you thinking about? Step 2. Amplify the symbol. This is Jung's method. Don't reduce the symbol to one meaning. Expand it. What are all the possible associations? Marcus's burning house, destruction, loss, catastrophe, purification, renewal, phoenix home, identity, shelter, release, freedom, letting go. Transformation through fire, don't pick one, hold them all. The unconscious speaks in paradox. The burning house is both destruction and renewal, both loss and liberation, both death and birth. Step 3. Ask what the symbol wants. This is the technique of active imagination that Jung developed. You don't just interpret the symbol, you dialogue with it. I asked Marcus to close his eyes and imagine himself back in the dream, standing in front of the burning house. Then I asked him to speak to the fire. What do you want from me? And then, this is the crucial part, he let the fire answer, not with his conscious mind, with whatever arose spontaneously from the unconscious. The fire's answer in Marcus's active imagination. I want you to stop trying to rebuild me. I want you to let me burn completely. I want you to watch me burn and learn that you don't die when your identity burns. The house is burning. You're still standing there. You're still alive. That's what I want you to see. Marcus started crying when he told me this, because he'd been frantically trying to put out the fires in his life, trying to save his firm, trying to fix his marriage, trying to hold on to his identity as the competent, successful architect who had everything under control. And the unconscious was saying, stop, let it burn. You'll survive this, but only if you stop trying to save what needs to die. Step 4. Track the evolution. Recurring symbols during chaos often evolve. They're not static. They're telling a story. They're guiding you through a process. Marcus's burning house dream changed over time. Months into his chaos, after he'd stopped fighting the collapse and started surrendering to it, the dream shifted. He was still watching the house burn, but now when he woke up, he'd noticed something new. In the distance, behind him in the dream, there was light on the horizon, dawn breaking. He hadn't noticed it before because he'd been fixated on the burning house, but it had been there all along. The fire was in the foreground, but dawn was in the background. Destruction and renewal happening simultaneously. This is how the unconscious works during chaos. It shows you the death, but it also shows you the birth. You just have to learn to look at the whole picture, not just the flames. Now, your recurring symbol might be completely different from Marcus's burning house. It might be water, drowning, floods, oceans, animals, snakes, birds, wolves, being chased or trapped, losing teeth or falling, a specific person who keeps appearing, natural disasters, earthquakes, tornadoes, a specific location from your past numbers, or colors that keep repeating. The specific symbol matters less than the recurrence. If you're seeing the same image again and again during your chaos, pay attention. Your unconscious is trying to tell you something. It's navigating you through the dark forest. It's sending breadcrumbs. I want to share something personal here. During my own chaos several years ago, when my relationship ended, my career imploded, and I went through a profound identity crisis, I kept dreaming about being underwater, deep underwater, ocean depths, sometimes drowning, sometimes breathing underwater somehow, sometimes just sinking deeper and deeper into darkness. For months, I interpreted this as pure anxiety. I'm drowning in my life. I can't breathe. I'm going under. But one dream changed my understanding. In this dream, I was sinking into the ocean depths, and instead of panicking, I let go. I stopped fighting. I surrendered to the sinking, and as I sank deeper and deeper, I started seeing bioluminescent creatures in the darkness, jellyfish, fish, organisms I didn't have names for, all glowing in the depths. There was life down there, in the darkness, in the depths. Beauty I would never have seen if I'd stayed on the surface, if I'd fought the sinking. When I woke up, I understood. The unconscious wasn't showing me drowning. It was showing me descent into the depths of my own psyche, into the darkness I'd been avoiding my whole life. And in that darkness, in those depths, there was life, there was beauty, there was truth I couldn't access from the surface. The chaos was pulling me down, not to kill me, to show me what was hidden in the depths. That's what recurring symbols do during chaos. They guide you to what you need to see, what you need to face, what you need to integrate. They're not random images generated by an anxious brain. They're communications from the part of you that knows the way through. So here's your practice. If you're experiencing chaos right now and a symbol keeps appearing in dreams, in synchronicities, in obsessive thoughts, don't dismiss it. Don't reduce it. Work with it. Document it. Amplify it. Dialogue with it. Track its evolution. Ask it, what are you trying to show me? What do I need to see? Where are you guiding me? And listen, not with your conscious mind, with the deep listening that comes when you're quiet enough, broken open enough, humble enough to receive communication from the unconscious. Jung wrote, "The dream is a little hidden door in the innermost and most secret recesses of the soul, opening into that cosmic night which was Psyche long before there was any ego consciousness." During chaos, that door opens wider. The symbols come through more clearly. The unconscious speaks more loudly. This is sign number 2, the recurring dream or symbol. And if you're seeing it, it means your chaos has a guide. The unconscious is navigating you. You're not lost. You're being led, sometimes through burning houses, sometimes through ocean depths, sometimes through images you don't understand yet, but will eventually when you've gone far enough into the journey. Trust the symbols. They know the way. And sometimes this is the third sign. The guide appears not in dreams, but in flesh. A person shows up at exactly the right moment, saying exactly what you needed to hear, a human messenger from the unconscious itself. The third sign that your chaos is secretly creating order is one of the most mysterious and, paradoxically, one of the most practical. Amid the destruction, a person appears, not someone you sought out, not someone you would have expected, but someone who shows up at precisely the right moment, saying exactly what you needed to hear or offering exactly the perspective that unlocks something in you. A therapist who understands you in the first session, a stranger in a coffee shop who shares their story and it mirrors yours perfectly, a friend who suddenly starts showing up differently, a mentor who enters your life just when you're ready to learn what they have to teach. This isn't networking. This isn't luck. This is what Jung called the constellation of the helpful figure archetype. When the ego collapses, when your conscious control fails, when you're broken open enough, the self attracts what's needed for transformation. Let me tell you about Sarah. Sarah was 32 when her life fell apart. Her partner of 7 years left her suddenly. She'd moved to a new city for the relationship, so when it ended, she had no support system, no community, no place that felt like home. She lost her job a month later. The company shut down. And then she lost her apartment because she couldn't afford rent without income. Within 3 months of her partner leaving, Sarah was homeless, sleeping in her car, showering at a gym, applying for jobs during the day, trying to hold it together, trying not to let anyone see how far she'd fallen. She ended up at a women's shelter. She'd resisted going for weeks because of shame, because she'd always been the capable one, the one who had her life together. But finally, she had no choice. Her first night at the shelter, she couldn't sleep. She sat in the common room at 2 in the morning, staring at nothing, feeling like she'd reached the absolute bottom of her life. Another woman came into the room. Older, maybe in her 60s, she sat down next to Sarah without asking permission and said, "First night?" Sarah nodded. "I remember my first night," the woman said. "Thought it was the end of my life. Turned out it was the beginning." Sarah looked at her. "How long ago was your first night?" 15 years ago." "You've been here for 15 years." Sarah's heart sank. "No," the woman laughed. I've been back here for 15 years as a volunteer. I lived here for 3 months 15 years ago. Divorce, job loss, health crisis, everything at once. Ended up here with nothing. Thought I'd lost everything." She paused, looking at Sarah with eyes that had clearly seen their own darkness. "But what I learned, what this place taught me, is that you can't lose yourself. You can lose your job, your relationship, your home, your money, your identity, but you can't lose yourself. Because underneath all that, underneath everything that can be taken away, there's something that can't be taken, and you don't find out what that is until everything else is gone." Sarah started crying, not sad crying, something else, recognition, relief, like someone had just told her the secret she'd been dying to hear. The woman stayed up with her for 3 more hours, shared her whole story, not just the crisis part, the transformation part, how losing everything forced her to discover who she was when she wasn't performing success, when she wasn't maintaining an image, when she wasn't anything except a human being trying to figure out how to live. She told Sarah, "This shelter is full of women who are being broken open, and that feels like breaking down. But breaking open is how the light gets in. You're right where you need to be." Sarah told me this story 2 years later. By then, she had her own apartment, a job she loved, a community of friends who knew the real her. But she said, "That woman at the shelter, I don't even remember her name, changed my life." What she said that night kept me going for months. Every time I wanted to give up, I heard her voice. "You can't lose yourself." And I started asking, who am I when everything is stripped away? Who am I underneath the performance? This is the third sign, the unexpected ally, the guide who appears. Jung called this the helpful figure archetype. During individuation, the process of becoming who you actually are, certain archetypal energies constellation in your psyche. And these internal archetypes often manifest externally as actual people who appear in your life. This isn't magical thinking. Or maybe it is, but it's magic that Jung observed consistently enough to document it as psychological law. Here's the mechanism. When your ego collapses, when your conscious control fails, when your defenses are down, you begin broadcasting a different frequency. Your internal state changes, and somehow, mysteriously, your external reality responds. You become receptive to connections you would have missed before. You notice people you would have overlooked. You're open to conversations you would have avoided. And simultaneously, and this is the part that feels like magic, the people you need start appearing, not because you're summoning them consciously, but because your psyche is in a state of transformation, and transformation has its own gravitational pull. Jung called this synchronicity, meaningful coincidence, when internal and external reality align in ways that can't be explained by causality. When the right person says the right thing at the right time, and the odds of that happening randomly are astronomically small, but it happens, over and over, especially during chaos. I've experienced this myself. During my own breakdown period, I was isolating heavily, avoiding almost everyone. But one day I forced myself to go to a bookstore. I was standing in the psychology section, and a man next to me pulled out a book, looked at it, then looked at me and said, "Have you read Jung?" I had, but I'd never really understood him. We started talking. Turned out he was a Jungian analyst. We talked for 2 hours. He gave me his card. I started seeing him for therapy the next week. That therapeutic relationship became the anchor of my transformation. The perspective he offered, the questions he asked, the way he helped me read my own unconscious, it changed everything. Was it coincidence that I went to that specific bookstore on that specific day? That I stood in that specific section at that specific time? That he was there, that he spoke to me, that we connected? Maybe. Or maybe when you're ready for the teacher appears. When you're ready for the guide shows up. When you're broken open enough to receive help, help arrives. Let me give you a framework for recognizing this sign in your own chaos. I call it the Guide Recognition Framework. Question 1. Have people appeared in your life during your chaos who spoke words you desperately needed to hear, shared a story that mirrored your own journey, offered perspective that unlocked something in you, provided practical help at a critical moment, reflected back to you something true about yourself? Asked a question that changed your trajectory. If yes, they're likely guides. Not all guides are dramatic or obvious. Some are subtle. A therapist who finally understands you, a book that finds its way to you, a podcast that addresses your exact situation, a friend who suddenly starts showing up differently than they ever have before. Question 2. Did the timing feel impossibly precise? This is the synchronicity marker. The guide appears not when you would have been ready 6 months ago or 6 months from now, but exactly when you need them. The precision is uncanny, like the universe knew exactly what you needed and when you needed it. Sarah needed that woman at the shelter on her first night, when she was at rock bottom, when she was most receptive. Any earlier, she might not have listened. Any later, she might have already given up. The timing wasn't random, it was perfect. Question 3. Did they offer something you couldn't find on your own? Real guides don't just tell you what you already know. They offer a perspective, an insight, a truth that you couldn't access from your current position. They see something in you that you can't see in yourself. They reflect back your potential, your strength, your authentic self, the parts that are buried under the rubble of your collapsed life. The woman at the shelter told Sarah, "You can't lose yourself." Sarah had been terrified she'd lost everything, including herself. The guide's words reframed the entire experience. Everything can be taken except who you actually are. And who you actually are only becomes visible when everything else is gone. That wasn't comfort. That was transmission. Transmission of a truth Sarah needed, but couldn't generate from her own consciousness in that moment. Question 4. Is there resistance to receiving their help? This is important. Real guidance often triggers resistance. Why? Because it threatens the ego, the victim story, the familiar suffering. Sarah almost didn't talk to that woman. Her ego wanted to maintain the story. I'm different. I don't belong here. This isn't who I am. The guide threatened that story by saying, "You're exactly where you need to be." If someone appears in your chaos offering help, insight, or perspective that makes you defensive or resistant, pay attention. That resistance might mean they're touching something true that your ego doesn't want to face. Now, let me be clear about something crucial. Not everyone who appears during your chaos is a guide. Some people are projections, some are distractions, some are actually obstacles disguised as help. How do you tell the difference? Real guides point you inward toward your own truth. Don't need you to need them. Offer perspective, not answers. Respect your autonomy. Don't promise to fix you or save you. Help you develop your own authority. False guides create dependency, need to be needed, offer certainty and easy answers, undermine your authority, promise salvation if you follow their system, keep you in the helper-helpless dynamic. The woman at the shelter didn't save Sarah. She shared her story and then let Sarah find her own way. The Jungian analyst I met didn't fix me. He taught me to read my own unconscious and trust my own process. Real guides are midwives, not saviors. They help you birth yourself. They don't give birth for you. But here's what's most mysterious about this sign. Sometimes the guide isn't a person at all. Sometimes it's a book that finds you. Sometimes it's a piece of art. Sometimes it's a song that plays at the exact moment you need to hear its message. Sometimes it's an animal that crosses your path at a synchronistic moment. I know how this sounds. I know the rational mind wants to dismiss this as pattern seeking, as confirmation bias, as the brain trying to find meaning in randomness. But Jung spent his entire career documenting these phenomena, not because he was mystical, though he was, but because he was empirical. He observed again and again that during psychic transformation, the boundary between inner and outer reality becomes permeable. What's happening inside you starts showing up outside you. The psyche speaks through external symbols, events, encounters, and the guide, whether person, book, symbol, or synchronicity, is the psyche's way of saying, I'm navigating you. You're not alone in this. Help is here. Pay attention. Let me tell you one more story because this one illustrates how guides can appear in completely unexpected forms. A man I worked with, call him David, was going through a brutal divorce. His wife had been having an affair for over a year. He felt betrayed, humiliated, destroyed. His identity as a husband, as someone worthy of love, was shattered. One morning he was sitting in his car in a parking lot, crying, unable to go into work, and a bird, a small sparrow, landed on his hood, just sat there, looking at him through the windshield. They stared at each other for several minutes. The bird didn't fly away. David stopped crying. Something about that tiny bird just sitting there, calm, present, it broke through his despair. He started talking to the bird, out loud, telling it everything, how betrayed he felt, how he didn't know who he was anymore, how he wanted to give up, and the bird just sat there, listening, or that's how it felt to David. Finally, after maybe 10 minutes, the bird flew away, and David felt something he hadn't felt in months, not alone. He knew rationally that the bird was just a bird, but something in him recognized that moment as communication, a guide appearing in the only form he could receive in that moment, not human, not words, just presence, just, you're not alone. After that, birds became significant for David. He started noticing them everywhere, reading about them, photographing them. Eventually, he started volunteering at a bird sanctuary, which is where he met the woman who would become his partner years later. Was the sparrow a guide? Rationally, no. It was just a bird that happened to land on his hood. But psychologically, mythologically, synchronistically, yes, it was a guide. It appeared at the exact moment he needed presence, and it became a thread he followed out of his despair and into a new life. This is what I mean by the constellation of helpful figures. The psyche is creative. It uses whatever material is available. Sometimes that's a person at a shelter. Sometimes that's an analyst in a bookstore. Sometimes that's a bird on a hood. The form doesn't matter. The function does. And the function is to tell you you're not alone, to offer perspective you can't access on your own, to reflect back something true, to guide you toward the next step when you can't see the path. So here's your practice. If you're in chaos right now, start paying attention to who and what is showing up. Not just people, books, songs, images, animals, synchronicities, conversations, random encounters that don't feel random. Ask yourself, what is this trying to tell me? What perspective is being offered? What am I being shown that I can't see on my own? And when you recognize a guide, when someone or something appears that offers genuine help, receive it. I know there's pride. I know there's shame. I know the ego wants to maintain the story that you should be able to do this alone. But transformation isn't a solo journey. It never has been. Every hero's journey includes guides. Every initiation includes elders. Every transformation includes helpers. Jung wrote, "Synchronicity is an ever-present reality for those who have eyes to see." During chaos, you develop those eyes, because you have to, because your old way of seeing has failed. And in your new way of seeing, you start noticing what was always there, Guides, helpers, allies sent by the unconscious itself to help you navigate the dark forest. This is the third sign, the unexpected ally, the guide who appears. And if you're seeing this sign, if people or synchronicities are showing up at precisely the right moments, it means your chaos has navigation. You're not lost. You're being led. The self knows the way, and it's sending guides to help you follow. But sometimes the guide isn't external at all. Sometimes the unconscious speaks through your own body, and when it does, the message is impossible to ignore. That's the fourth sign, the one that bridges the psychological and the physical, the one that proves the body is the unconscious made flesh. The fourth sign that your chaos is secretly creating order is one that terrifies people most. Your body breaks down. Physical illness, injury, exhaustion so profound it becomes medical. Health crisis that forces you to stop, to rest, to confront what you've been ignoring. And here's what makes people uncomfortable. Jung taught that the body is the unconscious, not the body reflects the unconscious, or the body is influenced by the unconscious. The body is the unconscious made visible, made flesh, made symptom. When the psyche is ignored, when the unconscious is suppressed, when the self is denied, the body speaks through illness, through injury, through breakdown that forces the confrontation your conscious mind has been avoiding. Let me be extremely clear about something before I go further. I am not saying all illness is psychological. I am not saying you created your disease with your thoughts. I am not suggesting you should spiritualize away real medical conditions or refuse treatment. Get medical care. Take your medications. Trust your doctors. This is not an either-or. The body is biological and psychological. Treating illness requires both medical intervention and psychological awareness. But, and this is where Jung's teaching becomes controversial, some health crises during chaos aren't random. They're not just bad luck or genetics or environmental factors. They're the body collaborating with the self to stop a path that's destructive, to force a pause that's necessary, to create conditions for transformation that the ego would never choose willingly. Let me tell you about James. James was a lawyer, corporate law, 60-hour weeks, high stress, high stakes, high income. He'd been doing it for 20 years. He was good at it, successful, respected, miserable. But James didn't acknowledge the misery. He acknowledged the success. He told himself the stress was just part of the job. He told himself the emptiness was just midlife. He told himself he'd slow down eventually, take time for himself, figure out what he really wanted. Later, after this case, after this deal, after he made partner, after, the unconscious tried to get his attention, he started having insomnia, then anxiety attacks, then digestive issues, then chronic tension headaches. He went to doctors. They gave him pills. The pills helped the symptoms. The symptoms came back worse. Then, at 42 years old, James had a heart attack, massive, nearly fatal. He survived only because it happened at the gym where there was a defibrillator nearby. He woke up in the hospital, tubes everywhere, wife crying next to him, and his first thought was, I have to call the office, the Mitchell case. That's when he realized he'd nearly died, and his first thought wasn't his wife, his kids, his life. It was a case, a client, the office. Something broke open in that moment. During his recovery, forced bed rest, no work, nothing to do but think, James started asking questions he'd been avoiding for 20 years. Why am I doing this? What am I running from? Who am I when I'm not performing success? He didn't like the answers. He realized he'd been using work as an escape, from intimacy with his wife, from presence with his kids, from his own grief about his brother's death 15 years earlier, grief he'd never processed because he'd been too busy, too strong, too fine. He realized his body had been screaming at him for years. The insomnia was saying, "You're living a life that won't let you rest." The anxiety was saying, "You're in constant danger because you're living against your own truth." The digestive issues were saying, "You can't stomach this life anymore." The headaches were saying, "The pressure is unbearable." And when all those whispers didn't work, the body escalated. It created a crisis that made continuing impossible. It forced the pause. It demanded the confrontation. James's heart attack wasn't just a medical event. It was a message from his body, from his unconscious, from the self that wanted to live and saw that James was dying inside his successful life. Jung wrote, "The body is the visible expression of the psyche." This is the psychosomatic principle, not "it's all in your head." The opposite, it's all in your body. The psyche that you've been ignoring, the unconscious you've been suppressing, the self you've been denying. It's living in your cells, your organs, your nervous system. And when it can't reach you any other way, it speaks through symptoms. Now, let me teach you something Jung called the wisdom of the symptom. Every illness, every injury, every health crisis has a medical explanation, but it often also has a psychological meaning, a symbolic dimension, a message. The wisdom of the symptom is this: the specific illness often corresponds symbolically to the psychological conflict. Heart problems, issues of the heart, love, connection, what you're cut off from, what's breaking your heart. Autoimmune diseases, the body attacking itself. The immune system can't distinguish self from non-self. Often corresponds to identity confusion, not knowing who you are, attacking yourself with criticism or self-betrayal. Digestive issues, what you can't stomach, can't digest, can't assimilate. Respiratory problems, can't breathe, feeling suffocated, life is choking you. Chronic pain, psychological pain that has nowhere else to go, so it becomes physical. Back problems, what you're carrying, what burden is breaking your back. Skin conditions, boundary issues, what's under the surface trying to break through what you're showing to the world. I'm not saying the illness is just symbolic. I'm saying it's both. It's biological and symbolic, medical and meaningful. And understanding the symbolic dimension doesn't replace treatment, it deepens it. Let me give you a framework for reading your body's messages. I call it the somatic message decoder. Step 1. Identify the symptom or illness. Be specific. Not just "I'm sick," but what exactly is happening in your body? What system? What function? What experience? Step 2. When did it start? Timeline matters. Did the symptom appear during your chaos? Right before it? After a specific event? The timing often reveals the psychological trigger. James's heart attack came after his biggest case, his biggest win, his moment of maximum success, which was also his moment of maximum disconnection from his actual life. Step 3. What does the symptom prevent you from doing? This is crucial. Illness creates forced pause. What specifically does it force you to stop? James couldn't work for 3 months. He had to rest. He had to be home. He had to be present. The heart attack forced exactly what he'd been refusing to do voluntarily. Step 4. Amplify the symbolic meaning. What are all the associations with the affected body part or system? Don't pick one meaning. Hold multiple meanings. The unconscious speaks in paradox and layers. Heart, love, connection, passion, life force, courage, core of heart. What animates you? What you care about? What central James's heart attack was forcing him to confront? What do I love? What gives me life? What am I courageous enough to change? What's at the center of my actual life versus my performed life? Step 5. Ask the body directly. This is active imagination with the body. Close your eyes. Focus on the area of illness or pain and ask it, "What are you trying to tell me? What do you need me to know?" Then listen, not with your conscious mind, with the deep listening that allows the unconscious to speak. When James did this exercise in therapy, his heart said, I'm tired of pumping blood through a life you don't want to live. I'm tired of keeping you alive for a death march. Either you change direction or I'm going to stop. I'm not trying to kill you. I'm trying to wake you up." He cried for an hour after that. Let me share something personal here because I think it's important for you to know I'm not speaking theoretically. I've experienced this myself. During my own crisis period several years ago, I developed severe chronic insomnia. For months, I couldn't sleep more than 2 or 3 hours a night. I tried everything: medication, meditation, sleep hygiene, supplements. Nothing worked. I was terrified. Exhaustion was making everything worse. I thought I was going crazy. I went to multiple doctors. They found nothing wrong physically. Finally, in therapy, my analyst asked me, "What would happen if you rested?" I immediately said, "I can't rest. There's too much to do." "No," he said, "I'm asking what would happen internally if you let yourself rest. What are you afraid would happen?" I sat with that question for a long time, and then it hit me. If I rested, if I stopped, if I wasn't busy, I'd have to feel what I'd been running from: grief, loneliness, emptiness, the terror that without my achievements, without my productivity, without my constant motion, I was nothing. My insomnia wasn't a medical problem, it was a psychological strategy. My unconscious wouldn't let me sleep because sleeping meant stopping, and stopping meant feeling, and feeling meant facing what I had been avoiding my entire life. Once I understood that, once I started actually feeling the grief, sitting with the loneliness, confronting the emptiness, my sleep started returning. Not immediately, but gradually. The symptom lost its purpose once the message was received. The body wasn't the problem, the body was the messenger, and I'd been trying to kill the messenger instead of reading the message. Now I want to address something important: the shadow side of this teaching, the way it can be misused. Some people hear illness has psychological meaning and turn it into spiritual bypassing or victim blaming. They tell people with cancer, "You created this with negative thoughts." They tell people with chronic illness, "You're just not letting go of trauma." They turn illness into moral failure. This is dangerous. This is cruel. This is not what Jung meant. Jung wasn't saying you create illness with your mind. He was saying psyche and soma are one system. What affects one affects the other. Trauma lives in the body. Unexpressed emotion becomes physical. The unconscious speaks through symptoms when it has no other voice. But that doesn't mean you're to blame for your illness. It means your illness might be trying to tell you something. And listening to that message, while also getting medical treatment, might be part of healing. Some illnesses have clear psychological components. Others don't. Some respond to psychological work. Others require purely medical intervention. The body is complex. Don't reduce it to simple formulas. But, and this is what Jung observed consistently, during chaos, during transformation, during times when the psyche is reorganizing, physical symptoms often increase. Why? Because the body is participating in the transformation. The chaos isn't just psychological, it's physiological. You're not just changing your mind. You're changing your nervous system, your immune function, your cellular patterns. James is 5 years out from his heart attack now. He left corporate law, took a massive pay cut, started working at a nonprofit doing legal aid for low-income families. His marriage improved because he was actually present. His relationship with his kids deepened because he was available. And his health transformed. Blood pressure normal, cholesterol normal, energy levels higher than they'd been in 20 years. His cardiologist called him a miracle case, but James told me it wasn't a miracle. My heart was fine once I started living a life my heart could support. The heart attack wasn't my body breaking down. It was my body breaking me open. That's the wisdom of the symptom. That's the body as unconscious. That's the fourth sign that your chaos is creating order. If your body is breaking down during your life chaos, if you're getting sick, injured, exhausted in ways that seem connected to your psychological state. Don't just treat the symptoms. Listen to the message. What is your body trying to force you to stop? What is it trying to make you face? What pause is it creating that you wouldn't create voluntarily? What truth is it speaking that your mouth won't say? Jung wrote, "The psyche is not separate from the body. They are two aspects of the same phenomenon." During chaos, that phenomenon becomes visible. The body shows what the psyche is experiencing. The physical mirrors the psychological, and sometimes the body has to break you open. But here's the practice. If you're experiencing health issues during chaos, 1. Get medical care. Rule out serious illness. Get treatment. This is not either or. 2. Ask the somatic questions. When did this start? What does it prevent? What might it symbolize? What might it be trying to tell me? 3. Listen to your body, not just with your mind, with your full attention, with respect for its intelligence. Your body is wiser than your ego. It knows what you need, even when your conscious mind doesn't. 4. Consider what pause or change the illness is forcing, and ask, is this pause necessary? Is this change something I've been avoiding? 5. Don't spiritualize away real illness. Don't blame yourself. But do stay curious about meaning. Even if the illness is primarily biological, it's happening during your transformation. What might it be teaching you? How might it be participating in your becoming? The body isn't an obstacle to consciousness. It's the vehicle for consciousness. It's not what you have to transcend. It's what you have to inhabit more fully. And sometimes this is the 5th sign. The body's need for pause connects to a deeper need, the need to withdraw from your entire social world, to retreat, to disappear, to enter what feels like hibernation but is actually incubation. The 5th sign that your chaos is secretly creating order is this: an overwhelming urge to withdraw from normal life. Not just sadness, not just fatigue, but a deep, almost biological drive to retreat. Quit your job, end relationships, move away, disappear from your social world. You want to pull back from everything and everyone. You want to be alone. You want to hide. And everyone around you is worried. They think you're depressed. They think you're giving up. They think you need to push through it, stay connected, keep showing up. But what if you're not depressed? Or not just depressed? What if this compulsion to withdraw is actually the psyche demanding incubation space? What if transformation requires a cocoon period? What if you can't become who you're meant to be while still performing who you've been? Let me tell you about Elena. Elena was what people called a social butterfly. Extroverted, vibrant, always surrounded by friends. She threw parties, she organized gatherings. She was the connector, the one who brought people together. Being around people energized her. Or that's what she'd always thought. Then, at 35, her life began unraveling. A complicated breakup, career uncertainty, her mother's cancer diagnosis. Nothing catastrophic in any single area, but the combination created a kind of existential tremor. She started feeling like she was performing her own life, watching herself from outside, not quite real. And then something strange happened. Elena stopped wanting to see people. The thought of social gatherings made her feel sick. Phone calls felt invasive. Even text messages felt like too much. She canceled plans. She stopped responding to invitations. She started spending entire weekends alone in her apartment, not even leaving to get groceries. Her friends were concerned. They staged an intervention of sorts. "You're isolating," they said. "That's a symptom of depression. You need to push through it. Come out with us. You'll feel better." Elena tried. She forced herself to go to a party. She lasted 30 minutes before she felt like she was going to have a panic attack. She left without saying goodbye, drove home, locked her door, and felt, for the first time in weeks, like she could breathe. That's when she came to therapy. "I think something's wrong with me," she said. "I used to love people. Now I can't stand being around anyone. Am I becoming agoraphobic? Am I broken? No, I said, you're becoming, and becoming requires solitude. Jung wrote about this extensively. He called it the night sea journey, the hero's descent into the underworld, into isolation, into the belly of the whale. Every transformation mythology includes this phase. The hero must leave the known world, must journey alone into darkness, must face themselves without the mirrors and masks of social life. This isn't pathology, it's process. Let me explain the difference between healthy withdrawal and pathological isolation, because this is crucial. Pathological isolation, driven by fear, shame, or avoidance, feels like hiding from life. No sense of purpose or direction, accompanied by self-harm, substance abuse, or deterioration. Permanent with no sense that it's a phase. Deadening, you feel less alive, less yourself. Healthy withdrawal, driven by need for space, silence, reflection, feels like returning to yourself. Sense of necessary pause, even if you don't understand why, accompanied by rest, introspection, creativity. Temporary, you sense this is a phase, not a permanent state. Enlivening, you feel more yourself in solitude than in performance. Elena's withdrawal was healthy. She wasn't hiding from life. She was gestating new life. She wasn't avoiding herself. She was finally meeting herself without the constant noise of social performance. Here's what Elena discovered during her 2-year cocoon period, as she came to call it. She'd been using social life as a distraction from herself, from her own thoughts, from her own emptiness. She'd never been alone because she was terrified of what she'd find there. But in the forced solitude of her withdrawal, she found something unexpected. Not emptiness herself, her actual thoughts, her actual feelings, her actual desires. For the first time in her life, she wasn't performing for anyone. She wasn't managing anyone's perception of her. She wasn't being Elena, the social butterfly. She was just being, and she didn't know who just being was, because she'd never met that person before. This is why withdrawal during chaos is necessary. The caterpillar doesn't transform into a butterfly while still crawling around on leaves with other caterpillars. It has to enter the cocoon. It has to be alone. It has to dissolve completely. Its caterpillar body literally liquefies inside the cocoon before it can reorganize into something new. Jung understood this deeply. He himself went through a prolonged period of isolation and withdrawal after his break with Freud. He called it his confrontation with the unconscious. For several years, he withdrew from social and professional life. He spent hours alone, dialoguing with figures from his unconscious, recording his visions in what would become the Red Book. People thought he was having a psychotic break. He thought so too at times. But he later understood it as the most important period of his life, the time when he descended into his own depths and discovered the foundations of his life's work. He wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But you cannot become who you truly are while constantly performing who others need you to be. You have to withdraw. You have to go into the wilderness, the hermitage, the cocoon. Let me give you a framework for assessing whether your withdrawal is healthy or needs intervention. I call it the withdrawal integrity check. Question 1. Is your withdrawal accompanied by self-care or self-destruction? Healthy withdrawal. You're resting, reading, creating, reflecting, dreaming, processing. You might not be social, but you're engaged with yourself. Unhealthy isolation. You're numbing, substances, excessive screen time, dissociation, neglecting basic needs, not eating, not sleeping, not hygiene, or engaging in self-harm. Question 2. Does the withdrawal feel like returning to yourself or losing yourself? Healthy withdrawal. Even though it's uncomfortable, there's a sense of finally being real, finally dropping the mask, finally meeting yourself. Unhealthy isolation. You feel more fragmented, more lost, less like yourself than ever. Question 3. Is there any spark of life or creativity emerging in your solitude? Healthy withdrawal. You might be writing, drawing, thinking deeply, having realizations, dreaming vividly. Something is happening in the silence. Unhealthy isolation. Nothing is happening, just deadness, just avoidance, just time passing without any internal movement. Question 4. Do you sense this is temporary, even if you don't know how long? Healthy withdrawal. There's an intuition that this is a phase, a cocoon period, necessary but not permanent. Unhealthy isolation. It feels like forever, like you'll never reconnect, like this is the new permanent reality. Question 5. Can you articulate, even vaguely, what you're withdrawing for, not just what you're withdrawing from? Healthy withdrawal. I need space to figure out who I am. I need silence to hear myself. I need solitude to process everything that's happened. Unhealthy isolation. I just can't face anyone. I don't want to exist. I want to disappear. If you answer the healthy side for most questions, your withdrawal is likely creative, not destructive. It's process, not pathology. It's cocoon, not prison. Elena's withdrawal checked all the healthy boxes. She was caring for herself. She was reading voraciously, mythology, psychology, spirituality. She started painting, something she hadn't done since college. She was having vivid dreams that she documented. She sensed it was temporary. I know I'll come back, she told me. I just don't know when or as whom. And she was clear about what she was withdrawing for. I need to find out who I am when I'm not performing for an audience. I need to meet myself without the mirrors of other people's reactions. 2 years later, Elena did re-emerge, but she emerged different. She still liked people, but she no longer needed constant social stimulation. She could be alone without anxiety. She had a rich internal life that didn't depend on external validation. Her friendships became deeper because they were based on authenticity, not performance. She told me, "The cocoon period saved my life. If I'd kept living the way I was, always on, always performing, always outside myself, I would have eventually completely disappeared. The withdrawal forced me back to myself. It was terrifying, but it was necessary." This is the night sea journey. This is the hermit phase. This is the cocoon period. And if you're experiencing this compulsion to withdraw during your chaos, if everyone is telling you to push through, to stay connected, to not isolate, consider the possibility that they're wrong. Consider the possibility that you know what you need better than they do. Maybe you don't need to push through. Maybe you need to surrender to the withdrawal. Maybe your psyche knows you need space, silence, solitude. Maybe transformation requires temporary hermitage. Now, let me be clear. If your withdrawal includes suicidal ideation, self-harm, or complete inability to function, get help immediately. Call a crisis line, see a therapist. Consider medication if needed. This teaching isn't about romanticizing dangerous isolation, but if your withdrawal is creating space for self-discovery, for rest, for processing, for meeting yourself, trust it, even if it's uncomfortable. Even if everyone is worried, even if it goes against everything you've been taught about mental health and staying connected, the caterpillar in the cocoon isn't sick, it's transforming, and transformation looks like death, complete dissolution, before it looks like rebirth. Jung wrote, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain. The pain of withdrawal, the loneliness, the fear, the sense of being lost, is often the pain of birth. You're not losing your life. You're birthing a new one. And birth requires solitude, darkness, time. Here's your practice. If you're experiencing the compulsion to withdraw. 1. Check the withdrawal integrity questions. Is this healthy or unhealthy? 2. If it's healthy, give yourself permission. You're not broken. You're in process. You're in the cocoon. 3. Use the solitude intentionally. Journal, create, dream, reflect. Let this time be active incubation, not passive avoidance. 4. Communicate with the people who care about you, not to justify or defend, but to help them understand. I'm going through a transformation. I need solitude right now. This doesn't mean I don't care about you. It means I need to meet myself without distraction. Please trust me. I'll come back when I'm ready. 5. Trust the timing. The cocoon period lasts as long as it needs to last. You can't rush metamorphosis. The butterfly emerges when it's ready, not when the caterpillar thinks it should. 6. Watch for what emerges in the silence. Dreams, insights, creativity, old memories surfacing, new desires forming. The withdrawal isn't emptiness, it's fullness finally having space to reveal itself. Elena said something in our last session that I've never forgotten. Everyone kept saying I was isolating from people. But I wasn't isolating from people. I was isolating with myself. For the first time in my life, I was keeping myself company, and it turned out I was pretty interesting company. That's the gift of the withdrawal phase. You discover you can be alone without being lonely. You discover you have an interior life rich enough to sustain you. You discover that the person you were performing for others wasn't who you actually are. And the person you actually are is someone you need to spend time with. But here's something interesting that often happens during the withdrawal phase. Certain desires start dying. Things you thought you wanted, things you chased for years, suddenly feel hollow, meaningless, even repulsive. And this death of desire, is the 6th sign that your chaos is creating order. The 6th sign that your chaos is secretly creating order is one of the most disorienting. Things you once desperately wanted suddenly feel meaningless, not slightly less appealing, completely hollow, dead. The ambitions that drove you for years now feel like someone else's dreams. The goals you work toward now seem pointless. The desires that animated your life have suddenly extinguished, leaving you feeling directionless, unmotivated, lost. And you panic. You think, I've lost myself. I don't want anything anymore. I have no drive. I'm depressed. I'm broken. But what if you haven't lost yourself? What if you've lost your false self? What if the death of desire isn't depression, it's liberation? What if those wants weren't actually yours to begin with? Let me tell you about Michael. Michael was 43 when his life imploded. Divorce, career stagnation, existential crisis, the usual chaos cocktail. But what disturbed him most wasn't the external collapse. It was the internal emptiness. Things he'd wanted his entire life suddenly meant nothing to him. For 20 years, Michael had been climbing the corporate ladder. He'd wanted to be a senior vice president. Then he wanted to be C-suite. Then he wanted to start his own company. He'd been driven, ambitious, hungry. Work was his identity. Success was his purpose. Then, during his chaos, that hunger just disappeared. He didn't want promotion anymore. He didn't want to start a company. He didn't even want to stay in his industry. When he thought about his career goals, he felt nothing. Not frustration, not sadness, just nothing. He also stopped caring about things that had mattered tremendously. His expensive car, he'd worked for years to afford it. Now it felt like a burden. His designer watch collection, his investment portfolio, his professional reputation, all of it felt hollow, performative, empty. I don't know who I am, Michael told me in our first session. I don't want anything. I used to have so much drive. Now I have nothing. What's wrong with me? Maybe, I said. Nothing is wrong with you. Maybe something is finally right. He looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language. Here's what we discovered. Michael's desires weren't his. They were his father's. His father had been a corporate executive. successful, powerful, respected, and Michael had spent his entire life trying to earn his father's approval by becoming his father's version of success. The ambition wasn't Michael's. It was his father's ambition living in Michael's body. The hunger for status, wealth, power, not Michael's hunger. His father's hunger that Michael had internalized and mistaken for his own authentic desire. And during the chaos, during the breakdown of Michael's carefully constructed false identity, the false desires died too, because they were attached to the persona, not the self. They were ego attachments, not soul callings. Jung wrote, "Your visions will become clear only when you can look into your own heart." But Michael had never looked into his own heart. He'd only looked at his father's expectations, his culture's definitions of success, his peer group's status markers. He'd been living someone else's life, chasing someone else's dreams, and now those dreams were dying. Not because he was broken, because they were never his to begin with. This is what Jung called the transformation of libido. Libido meaning psychic energy, life force. During individuation, during transformation, psychic energy withdraws from false attachments and redirects toward authentic paths. Old desires die so new desires can be born, but there's a gap, a void, a period of desirelessness that feels terrifying. You're no longer motivated by the old wants, but you haven't yet discovered the new ones. You're between motivations, between identities, between lives. This is one of the most difficult phases of transformation, because we're taught that motivation, drive, and ambition are essential. If you don't want anything, something must be wrong with you. Depression, apathy, failure to launch. But Jung saw it differently. He saw the death of desire as a necessary phase. You have to let the false hungers die before true hunger can emerge. You have to empty yourself of borrowed dreams before your own dreams can take shape. Let me give you a framework for distinguishing between false desires and authentic callings. I call it the desire audit. False desires, ego-driven, motivated primarily by external validation, status, approval, looking successful. Driven by fear, fear of not being enough, fear of judgment, fear of insignificance. Feel like I should want this, I should achieve this, successful people do this. Produce anxiety even when achieved. You get what you wanted but feel empty. Come from comparison, others have this, so I need it too. Feel like performance. You want the image of having it more than actually having it. Originated from family, our culture, programming. Parents wanted this for you. Society says this matters. Authentic callings, self-driven, motivated primarily by internal resonance. This feels true, meaningful, aligned, driven by love of the activity, the expression, the contribution. Feel like must, not obligation, but compulsion from deep inside. Produce fulfillment even in pursuit. The journey itself feels meaningful, independent of comparison. Doesn't matter what others are doing. Feel like expression. You want to actually be this, not just be seen doing, being it. Originated from your core, has been whispering to you your whole life, even when you ignored it. Michael realized all his career ambitions checked the false desire boxes. Status-driven, fear-motivated, should-based, anxiety-producing even when achieved. Comparison-fueled, performative, his father's programming. And when those desires died during his chaos, he panicked because he thought he'd lost himself. But he hadn't lost himself. He'd lost the false self. And that created space for his authentic self to begin emerging. But, and this is crucial, authentic desires don't emerge immediately. There's a gap, sometimes months, sometimes years, a void period where you don't want the old things but don't yet know what you actually want. Jung called this the dark night of the soul. Christian mystics wrote about it. Every mystical tradition recognizes it. The phase where old motivations die and new ones haven't been born yet, where you're motivationally empty, directionally lost, purposelessly adrift. And our culture has no patience for this phase. Figure out what you want. Find your passion. Set new goals. Productivity culture, self-help culture, therapy culture, they all want you to quickly replace old desires with new ones. Get moving, get motivated, get back to chasing something. But what if the void is necessary? What if you need to spend time not wanting anything before you can discover what you authentically want? What if desire needs to die and remain dead for a while before true desire can resurrect? Michael spent almost a year in the void. He didn't quit his job. He needed income, but he stopped pursuing advancement. He stopped networking. He stopped performing ambition. He showed up, did his work, went home. That's it. His colleagues thought he'd given up. His ex-wife used it as evidence that he was having a breakdown. His father was disappointed. But Michael was doing something more important than pursuing goals. He was listening for what wanted to emerge, listening for authentic desire, listening for the self's guidance instead of the ego's demands. And gradually, very gradually, something started stirring, not ambition, something quieter, a pull toward something he'd always dismissed as impractical, working with his hands, building things, woodworking specifically. He'd loved it as a teenager. His grandfather had taught him. But it wasn't a career. It wasn't impressive. It didn't make money. So he'd abandoned it for real ambition, corporate success, status, wealth. Now, during the void, the old love was returning. He started spending weekends in his garage, building furniture, not to sell, not to post on Instagram, just to build, just to work with wood and feel the satisfaction of creating something with his hands. He felt more alive doing that than he'd felt in 20 years of corporate achievement. That was his authentic desire emerging, not replacing the false desires, but appearing in the space they'd left behind. 2 years after his chaos began, Michael left corporate life. He started a small custom furniture business. He makes 1/10 of his former income. He'll never be wealthy. He'll never be a senior executive. He'll never make his father proud in the way he'd always tried to. But he told me, I finally know what wanting something actually feels like. Not needing to want it, not thinking I should want it, but actually wanting it. This is my desire. This is my hunger. And it's so different from the borrowed hunger I lived with for 40 years. This is the 6th sign, the death of old desires. And if you're experiencing it, if things you thought you wanted now feel meaningless, if ambitions that drove you have suddenly extinguished, if you're in the void of desirelessness, you're not broken, you're in transition. The old ego identifications are dying, the false hungers are releasing, the borrowed dreams are being returned to their owners. And in the empty space, the uncomfortable, disorienting, terrifying empty space, your authentic desires are being conceived. You can't rush this. You can't force authentic desire to appear. It has its own timing, its own gestation period. All you can do is wait in the void. Stay in the gap. Tolerate the emptiness without frantically trying to fill it with new goals, new ambitions, new false desires. Jung wrote, the psychological rule says that when an inner situation is not made conscious, it happens outside as fate. Michael's fate, his chaos, his divorce, his collapse, was his unconscious forcing him to confront the inner situation. He was living someone else's life, chasing someone else's dreams, dying inside while looking successful outside. The chaos killed the false desires, and that felt like dying, but it was only the false self dying. The true self was being born in the emptiness. Here's your practice if you're in the death of desire phase. 1. Stop trying to immediately replace old desires with new ones. Resist the pressure to quickly find your passion. Give yourself permission to want nothing for a while. 2. Use the desire audit. Look at what died. Was it authentic or false? Ego or self? Fear-driven or love-driven? Yours or borrowed? 3. Tolerate the void. This is the hardest part, sitting in emptiness, not knowing what you want, not having direction, not being motivated. It's uncomfortable, but it's necessary. 4. Pay attention to small stirrings, not big new ambitions, but quiet pulls, subtle interests, old loves you abandoned, things that feel true even if they're impractical. 5. Don't judge what emerges. Your authentic desire might not be impressive, might not make money, might not make sense to others, might not fit your self-image. That's okay. It's yours. That's what matters. 6. Remember, the death of desire is not the end of desire. It's the death of false desire. True desire is gestating. Give it time. Give it space. Trust the process. Michael's story has a coda that's important. 5 years into his furniture business, his father came to visit, saw Michael's workshop, watched him work, and said something Michael had waited his whole life to hear. "You're finally yourself. I see you now. I never saw you before." The irony, Michael had spent decades trying to become someone his father would see and approve. But his father could only see him once Michael stopped trying to be seen and started being himself. That's what the death of old desires creates space for, becoming visible to yourself and others as who you actually are. Not who you should be, not who others need you to be, but who you are beneath all the borrowed hungers and false ambitions. And sometimes, in the process of these old desires dying, you start recognizing something else, a pattern, the same pattern repeating across your life in different forms. And this recognition, this is the 7th sign. The one that reveals your chaos isn't random at all, it's curriculum. The 7th sign that your chaos is secretly creating order is perhaps the most profound. You suddenly recognize that your current chaos isn't new. It's happened before. Maybe not in the exact same form, but the same pattern, the same dynamic, the same lesson you've been refusing to learn, repeating over and over until you finally see it. This is what Jung called repetition compulsion. The unconscious recreates unresolved conflicts until they're integrated. Your psyche keeps setting up the same scenario in different costumes, with different characters in different settings, trying to teach you what you keep refusing to learn. And when you finally see the pattern, really see it, everything changes. The chaos stops feeling like random bad luck. It starts feeling like curriculum, like your unconscious has been trying to teach you the same lesson for years, decades even, and the chaos is that lesson finally escalating to a volume you can't ignore. Let me tell you about Amanda. Amanda was 39 when she came to therapy, devastated by her 3rd significant romantic relationship ending. 3 relationships, 3 spectacular failures, 3 partners who, on the surface, seemed completely different personalities, different backgrounds, different careers, but 3 identical endings. Each partner had emotionally withdrawn. Each had made Amanda feel like she was too much, too needy, too intense, too demanding. Each had eventually left, saying some version of "I need space" or "I can't give you what you need." In our first session, Amanda was angry at them, at herself, at the universe. "Why does this keep happening to me?" she asked. "Am I just attracting emotionally unavailable people? Am I cursed? What am I doing wrong?" Notice the question. Why does this keep happening to me? That's the victimhood position. Events happening to you. Random misfortune, bad luck, wrong people, circumstances outside your control. But Jung would ask a different question. Why do you keep creating this? Not to blame, but to empower, because if you're creating it unconsciously, unintentionally, but creating it nonetheless, then you can stop creating it. Once you see the pattern, once you understand the repetition. I asked Amanda, Tell me about your father." She looked startled. "What does my father have to do with my relationships?" "Maybe everything," I said. "Tell me about him." Her father had been emotionally distant, physically present but psychologically absent, consumed by work, by his own issues, by anything except emotional availability to his daughter. Amanda had spent her childhood trying to get his attention, his approval, his love, trying to be interesting enough, good enough, valuable enough to make him see her. She never succeeded. He never saw her, not really. And then, this is the crucial part, she grew up and unconsciously started recreating that dynamic in every significant relationship. She chose partners who were emotionally unavailable, like her father. She tried to earn their love by being perfect, interesting, valuable, like she'd tried with her father. She felt perpetually unseen, unvalued too much, like she'd felt with her father. The pattern was identical. The players were different, but the play was the same. This is repetition compulsion. The unconscious, trying to resolve the original wound, recreates the original dynamic, not to torture you, to give you another chance to heal it, another chance to see it, another chance to choose differently. But until you see the pattern, you can't choose differently. You just keep blaming the partners, blaming yourself, blaming fate, and unconsciously setting up the same scenario again. Amanda sat in silence for a long time after this realization. Then she said quietly, "I've been dating my father for 20 years. Yes, exactly, Jung wrote. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Amanda's relationship failures weren't fate. They were unconscious pattern. They were unintegrated father wound. They were repetition compulsion trying to give her the lesson over and over. You're choosing men who can't see you because you're trying to make your father finally see you. But your father is your father. These men are not your father, and you don't need to earn love by being perfect." Once Amanda saw the pattern, really saw it, felt it, understood it, she could start making different choices. Not immediately. Pattern recognition is just the beginning, but it's the necessary beginning. You can't change a pattern you can't see. Now, let me teach you how to recognize your own patterns, because they're there. Everyone has them. The unconscious is relentlessly educational. It will keep teaching the same lesson until you learn it. I call this the pattern mapping exercise. Step 1. Identify the recurring negative experience. What keeps happening in your life that feels like not again? Relationship betrayals, career failures, financial crises, health collapses, friendship losses. The same type of conflict over and over. Be specific. Not bad things happen to me, but what specific type of bad thing keeps repeating? Step 2. List the incidents. Write down each time this pattern has appeared. Don't just remember 2 or 3. Really dig. How many times has this happened? 5, 10, your whole life? Amanda listed her 3 major relationships, plus 2 significant earlier relationships she'd initially dismissed as not serious. 5 times. Same pattern, different men. Step 3. Look for the common denominator. This is the crucial step. What's the common element across all incidents? Not the external circumstances. Those will vary. But the internal dynamic. The role you played, the feeling you had, the way it ended. For Amanda, always chose unavailable men. Always tried to earn their love. Always felt too much. Always ended in abandonment. Step 4. Track it back to origin. When did you first feel this feeling? When did you first experience this dynamic? Usually, not always, but usually, it tracks back to childhood, to a parent, to an early wound that never healed. Amanda's origin, her relationship with her emotionally absent father. The template was set at age 5, 6, 7. I am too much. I need to earn love. I will never be seen. Step 5. Ask the pattern question. This is the question that changes everything. What is this pattern trying to teach me? Not why does this keep happening to me, but what am I supposed to learn from this repetition? The pattern is curriculum. The chaos is the escalating volume of that curriculum. What's the lesson? For Amanda, the lesson was, stop trying to earn love from people who can't give it. Your worth isn't determined by whether emotionally unavailable men choose you. You don't need to perform for love. You need to recognize your inherent value and choose partners who already see it. Sounds simple, right? It's not. This lesson had been trying to reach Amanda for 20 years, through 5 relationships, through countless therapy hours, through self-help books and friends' advice and her own journaling, but she couldn't hear it because the father wound was too deep. The pattern was too unconscious. It took her 3rd major relationship ending, the most painful one, the one she'd invested the most in, for the pattern to finally become visible. The repetition had to escalate to that volume before she could finally see it. Jung observed this again and again. The unconscious will keep turning up the volume until you finally hear the message. Whisper becomes shout. Shout becomes scream. Scream becomes catastrophe. Not because the unconscious is cruel, but because the ego is so defended, so resistant, so committed to not seeing what needs to be seen. Now, let me share something personal here, because I need you to know I'm not speaking from some place of enlightened superiority. I've lived this pattern myself. My pattern, rescuing people, playing the hero, getting into relationships where I was the helper, the guide, the one who was together, helping the one who was struggling, and then feeling trapped, resentful, exhausted, but unable to leave because leaving would mean I'd failed to save them. This pattern repeated through multiple relationships, friendships, even professional dynamics. Different people, same pattern. Always the rescuer, always eventually the resentful martyr. It took a particularly devastating relationship ending, one where I'd tried so hard to save someone who didn't want to be saved, for me to finally see it. Finally ask, why do I keep creating this? The answer tracked back to my childhood, my mother's depression, my unconscious decision at maybe age 8 or 9. I will make her happy. I will save her. My worth is in fixing her. I couldn't fix her. No child can fix their parents' mental health. But that pattern, my worth comes from saving people, became the template for every significant relationship in my adult life, until it finally broke me. Until I was so exhausted from trying to save people who didn't want saving that I finally asked, what is this teaching me? The lesson, you don't save people, you show up for people. But their transformation is theirs, not yours. Your worth isn't in fixing others. Your worth is inherent. Stop auditioning for the role of savior. It's killing you. Simple lesson. Took me 40 years and countless repetitions to learn it. That's how patterns work. They're obvious in retrospect, invisible in the moment, and they keep repeating until the pain of repetition exceeds the comfort of familiarity. Here's what I want you to understand. If you're seeing a pattern now, if your current chaos has made visible a repetition you've been living your whole life, this is huge. This is the sign. This recognition is the beginning of liberation. Because you can't change a pattern you can't see. But once you see it, really see it, you can choose differently, not perfectly, not immediately, but gradually, consciously, intentionally. Amanda started choosing differently. She dated someone who was emotionally available, and it felt wrong, boring, uncomfortable. Because it didn't match her father wound template, she almost sabotaged it. But she caught herself. She recognized, this feels wrong because it's unfamiliar. But unfamiliar doesn't mean bad. It means different. She stayed. She learned to receive love instead of earning it. She learned to be seen instead of performing for attention. She learned that too much wasn't a flaw, it was her intensity, her passion, her aliveness, and the right person wouldn't find it too much. 5 years later, she's married, happy, secure, not because she found the perfect person, but because she stopped recreating the father pattern. She broke the repetition compulsion. That's what seeing the pattern does. It gives you choice. It moves you from, why does this keep happening to me, to, why am I creating this and how can I create something different? Here's your practice if you're in the pattern recognition phase. 1. Do the pattern mapping exercise. Write it out. Seeing it on paper makes it visible in a way thinking doesn't. 2. Track it to origin. What's the earliest version of this pattern? What childhood experience created the template? 3. Ask, what is this trying to teach me? Not, why is this happening, but what's the lesson? 4. Practice compassion for yourself. You've been running this pattern because it was your best survival strategy at some point. It's not weakness, it's an outdated adaptation that needs updating. 5. Start choosing differently, but expect discomfort. New choices feel wrong because they don't match the old template. That discomfort is a sign you're changing, not a sign you're making a mistake. 6. Be patient with yourself. Pattern recognition is just the beginning. Pattern transformation takes time, practice, mistakes, backsliding. You're rewiring neural pathways, healing ancient wounds, changing unconscious behavior. Be gentle with the process. Jung wrote, "We cannot change anything until we accept it." Pattern recognition is accepting it, seeing it, taking responsibility for it, not blaming yourself, but empowering yourself. Because if you created it unconsciously, you can create something different consciously. And here's the profound truth about the pattern recognition sign. When you finally see the pattern, you realize your chaos wasn't random. It was intelligent. It was the unconscious escalating the lesson until you finally learned it. Your third failed relationship wasn't punishment. It was your psyche saying, please, please see the pattern. Please learn the lesson. I'm trying to free you from this repetition. The chaos is the volume increase. The pain is the wake-up call. The pattern becoming visible is the moment of potential liberation. If you're seeing your pattern now, really seeing it for the first time, this is the sign. Your chaos has a purpose. It's trying to teach you what you've needed to learn your whole life. And now, finally, you're ready to see it. But pattern recognition often opens a door to something else, something unexpected. Sometimes in the midst of seeing old patterns, creativity erupts. Art appears. Expression demands to be made. And this creative emergence is the 8th sign that your chaos is secretly creating order. The 8th sign that your chaos is secretly creating order is one of the most unexpected. Amid the destruction, creativity erupts. Not the careful, planned creativity of a hobby or a class, but urgent, compulsive creativity. You suddenly need to paint, write, play music, dance, build. Something you haven't done in years, maybe decades, or something you've never done at all but suddenly can't not do. And it doesn't make sense. Your life is falling apart. You should be focused on survival, finding a job, saving your relationship, dealing with crisis. But instead, you're spending hours drawing or writing poetry or learning piano or building furniture, and you can't explain why. You just know you have to. This isn't distraction. This isn't avoidance. This is the self announcing itself. This is the authentic you, finally having space to emerge, expressing itself through creative work before it can express itself through living. Let me tell you about Thomas. Thomas was an accountant, 47 years old, good at his job, reliable, responsible, the kind of person who color-coded his spreadsheets and alphabetized his spice rack, ordered, controlled, safe. Then he got laid off. His department was eliminated, 22 years with the company, gone. And instead of immediately starting the job search, instead of panic applying to every accounting position available, Thomas started painting. He hadn't painted since he was 19, had been good at it in college, even majored in art for a semester, before his father convinced him to switch to something practical. He'd put away the paints, picked up accounting, built a sensible life. But now, unemployed, everything collapsing, Thomas bought canvases and paints, set up an easel in his apartment, and started painting obsessively. Not pretty pictures, not careful, controlled compositions, but intense, chaotic, emotional explosions of color. Images from dreams, symbols he didn't understand, faces that looked like himself but weren't quite. His wife was worried. "You need to be looking for work," she said. "You need to focus on what's practical." "I know," Thomas said, "but I can't stop painting." He'd paint for 8, 10, 12 hours. Lose track of time, forget to eat. Wake up at 3 a.m. and go straight to the easel. It was compulsive, urgent, like something inside him that had been locked away for 30 years had finally broken free and was pouring out onto canvas. When he showed me the paintings in therapy, I was struck by their power. They weren't technically perfect, but they were psychologically revealing. Each one was showing him something about himself, about his journey, about his transformation. One painting, a man in a suit, but the suit was empty. No body inside, just clothes, standing upright, hollow. "That's who I was," Thomas said. "The accountant, the responsible one, the suit. But there was nobody inside. I performed that role for 30 years, but it wasn't me." Another painting, the same suited figure, but now it was burning, flames consuming the empty clothes. "That's what the layoff did," he said. "It burned the persona. It destroyed the false self. And I was terrified because I thought that's who I was. But I wasn't the suit. I was what was hidden underneath." A third painting, a figure emerging from flames. Not burned, transformed. Colors I didn't have words for. Eyes that looked awake for the first time. "That's who I'm becoming," he said. "I don't know what that looks like in practical terms yet, but I know he's an artist. I know he's been buried my whole adult life, and he's finally coming out." This is what Jung meant when he said creative work is individuation. The unconscious speaks through images, through symbols, through art. What can't be said in words gets expressed in paintings, music, poetry, dance. The self makes itself visible through creation. Thomas's paintings were showing him his psychological journey in symbolic form. The death of the false self, the burning of the persona, the emergence of the authentic self. He was documenting his transformation in real time through art. And here's what's crucial. This wasn't therapy art. This wasn't him consciously trying to express his feelings. This was the unconscious expressing itself directly through him. He didn't decide what to paint. The paintings came through him. He was a vessel for images emerging from the depths. Jung experienced this himself. After his break with Freud, during his years of confrontation with the unconscious, he engaged in what he called active imagination, allowing images from the unconscious to emerge and recording them. He painted mandalas, he carved stone, he built structures. The creative work wasn't about making art. It was about giving the unconscious a voice, a form, a way to communicate what words couldn't capture. Later, he wrote in The Red Book, "The creation of something new is not accomplished by the intellect, but by the play instinct acting from inner necessity. The creative mind plays with the objects it loves." Inner necessity. That's what Thomas was experiencing, not choice, necessity. He had to paint. The self demanded it. The unconscious was speaking, and creation was its language. Now, your creative emergence might look completely different from Thomas's. It might be writing, journaling, poetry, fiction, memoir, music, playing instruments, composing, singing. Dance or movement, your body needing to express what your mind can't. Building or making. Woodworking, crafts, sculpture. Cooking or baking, creating through food. Gardening, creating through growing things. Photography, capturing what you're seeing differently. The medium doesn't matter. What matters is the urgency, the compulsion, the sense that this isn't optional, you have to create. And often, the creative work shows you things you couldn't access through thinking. It reveals symbols, patterns, insights that bypass the conscious mind and come straight from the unconscious. Let me teach you how to work with this creative emergence. I call it the creative emergence practice. Step 1. Don't question it, just follow it. When the creative impulse comes, and it often comes during chaos, when your defenses are down, don't analyze it. Don't ask, why am I wanting to paint instead of looking for a job? Just do it. The rational mind will always have objections. The unconscious doesn't care about your objections. It needs expression. Step 2. Create without judgment. This isn't about making good art. This isn't about skill or talent or whether anyone else will like it. This is about giving the unconscious a voice. Create freely, messily, imperfectly. Don't edit, don't critique, just let it flow. Thomas's early paintings were chaotic. He didn't care. They weren't for a gallery. They were for his soul. Step 3. Pay attention to recurring symbols. Just like with dreams, creative work during chaos often contains recurring images. Notice what keeps appearing. A specific color, a specific shape, a specific figure. These are symbols from your unconscious, showing you something important. Thomas kept painting fire over and over, burning, transformation through flame, the phoenix motif. It was showing him, this destruction is purification. This chaos is burning away what's false so what's true can emerge. Step 4. Dialogue with what you create. After you've created something, a painting, a piece of writing, a sculpture, use active imagination with it. Look at it and ask, what are you trying to tell me? What do you want me to see? Then listen, not with your thinking mind, with that deeper listening that lets the unconscious speak. Thomas did this with his paintings. He'd sit with them and let them speak. The empty suit said, I was your prison. The burning figure said, I'm your liberation. The emergent being said, I'm who you've always been underneath. Step 5. Don't force practical application yet. The ego wants to immediately monetize or rationalize the creative work. Great, I'm painting. Now how do I turn this into a career? How do I make money from this? How do I make this practical? Resist that. Right now, in the chaos, the creative work is healing. It's transformation. It's the self-expressing itself. Let it be that. The practical applications will emerge later if they're meant to. Thomas eventually did start selling paintings, but not for 2 years, and by then he didn't care if he sold them or not.